Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Heller Career Development Center's Alumni Career Chats, where we're having conversations with alumni about their careers and everything in between. My name is Belvin, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Career Development at the Heller School for Social Policy and Management at Brandeis University, and also the host of this week's webcast. And I'm honored to have with us today Juliana Castaño, who is a Marine Natural Resource Management Specialist at the World Bank. She graduated from the Heller School in 2011 with a Master's of Sustainable International Development. And Juliana has been with the World Bank for nearly 8 years, serving in a variety of diverse roles. Prior to her time at the World Bank, she also served as a conservation planner at the Nature Conservancy, a project analyst with Carbon Decision International, and a MARIS Program Associate with Forest Trans International. Juliana, it is a pleasure to be here with you today. And I just want to make sure that I did pronounce your name correctly.
Thank you, Benny. It's really great to be with you. And hello, everybody. I don't know at what time are you going to watch this video, but it is really a pleasure to be with all of you. You pronounce very well my name, Juliana Castaño. So, yeah.
So how is everything going with you these days? I know there's a lot going on with the COVID-19 pandemic and just the freneticness of work, but how is everything these days?
It's okay overall. I would say that, yeah, it's a very strange time, but you can get the best of it, I would say. Although I miss having freedom and going back to my country to visit my family, I have to say that I have been taking a lot of advantage of just spending time with my family, with my daughter. She's 3 years old, and my husband.
Oh my, yes, trust me. I think that is something that people can relate to. I know, and you and I have talked, and I have 2 little ones, so I spent so much time with them, so much time, Juliana. Maybe, I don't know if that's too much. So, I mean, in getting into it, looking at your background, you have a great background, by the way, but how does one go from the Heller School to a natural resource management specialist for the World Bank? So take me through that a little bit. How did you get there? You know, did you know that the World Bank would be a destination as a career choice, or?
Thank you, Benny. Yeah, it's a very good question. It was always in my head, the World Bank. However, well, it's been like a very long road. You know, it's been almost 10 years since I graduated from my master's at Heller. So I guess, well, even though it takes a lot of effort, like preparing yourself, gaining a lot of technical skills, also, I guess, social skills, it's also a lot about luck, like who is just next to you in the right moment, and how can you take advantage of these opportunities, right? But there's something very important, and is that you just can't rest on your laurels. I don't know if that's something that you use, but in Spanish we use a lot that concept or that phrase. And it means that even though you were probably lucky to be born in a family that was probably able to provide you with education, and that you were able to go to Brandeis, for example, it's just not only about that, it's a lot about the effort that goes together with it. So as I said, it's about how much are you gaining knowledge and being up to date in a specific topic, for example, that you like, and how do you use as much as possible the resources that you have around. And it's not only about the knowledge, but it's also about your connections, and how can you build on that. So I guess I can share more about like how has it been in terms of network, how can you connect with other people and make sure that you keep that alive.
Yeah, and and that gets nicely into the next question, which is the resources, strategies, and tools that were helpful as you were developing your career. You mentioned networking, so take it away. What was helpful as you were developing your career?
I guess that network is one of the key things that you should be like very careful, and you should focus a lot on it. It doesn't matter whether if it's a junior person or a very senior person. It's very important for you to not stop asking people to connect you with others. So keep growing that network, because you just can't lose with that. You will always gain knowledge about what others are doing, and that's at the very least. But then you can also gain friends, and you can gain also lifelong colleagues that can help you with your career growth and how to shape it. And I think that's very, very important. But it's also about the tools that you have in terms of meeting. For instance, how can you use LinkedIn? How can you use Google? So for instance, I think that it's very important, as I was mentioning, how can you keep up to date in terms of the specific interest, the specific topic. In my sector, it's about oceans and like the blue economy, for instance. So how much am I reading and identifying like the key authors of peer-reviewed papers or just general publications? And then once you identify like very specific topics, how can you connect with them? So we are in the 21st century, so there's a very high chance that you can find the email or the LinkedIn of this person in Google. So just Google it and contact them. And just go for it and just ask this person, hey, can I just have a call with you? And well, right now we can't have like face-to-face meetings, but we can have virtual coffees, and just take advantage of that, how internet is helping you to connect with anybody in the world. So I think that it's very important not to give up. A lot of people might be very busy, and you can maybe you can't imagine how many people I emailed when I was doing my master's. But just keep trying and keep telling people what are you doing, even though you are not receiving any response. Just keep telling them like I'm doing this and that, so people are just aware of what you're doing. So I think that those were like important resources and tools for me.
You know, I think that's wonderful, Juliana, because as career development professionals, we say it to students and alumni all the time. And sometimes they believe us, and sometimes they have tried it, but they didn't get the result. Were you always savvy at networking, or is this something that you learned as you develop your career? Were you savvy when you were at Heller? Or did you develop it after Heller?
Actually, was developed during my time at Heller.
Oh, there it is.
It was a lot about what I learned in the career development sessions, I would say.
Okay.
I had no idea how to sell myself. In Latin America, I would say that we are usually like very modest, and we just don't like to say out loud things or to reach out to people like that. But I felt that that was a very good advice from Heller, and it helped me a lot in my career growth. Yes.
All right. See, we didn't pay anything for that, but we appreciate that. Shout out for us. So you have a great background, and you spent 8 years, or spending 8 years at the World Bank. But prior to the World Bank, you worked at a number of other organizations. And so, how did you have a path leading up to the World Bank? Did you think that you were always interested in marine, natural resources or marine life? It looks like environment, natural resources seems to be forestry seems to be thematic of your experience. Is this something that you've always been interested in that sort of led you down this path?
Well, I guess I was always interested in environment because I'm a biologist by background. So I guess that the fact I was working in forestry projects, it wasn't like what I really wanted, but it was, perhaps people who have worked in environment will will agree with what I'm going to say, and it's that all the strategies, the environmental strategies, are very well developed in terrestrial areas. And the application of this knowledge to the marine environment has been going a little bit slow, and we have to learn a lot about the terrestrial strategy. So when I joined, for example, Carbon Decisions International, or for instance, Terra Global Capital, it was about carbon credits. So my interest was, how can we develop I guess that financial mechanisms to support conservation. And this wasn't developed yet in the marine arena. So that's why I started with the forestry area. And so, but I was always interested in the marine environment. And I was just lucky that I could just start working in the marine conservation, for example, with forest trends with the MARES program. But I was always keeping in mind the World Bank, because of course it's like a very large institution that has a lot of impact in international development, where you can gain knowledge from multiple countries and you can be involved in a lot of decision making. But at that time, the marine program at the bank, at the World Bank, wasn't that strong. So I started working at the bank as a rural development specialist at the beginning, where I was working on payments for ecosystem services, carbon credits, but it was more on terrestrial, like livestock, like cattle ranching projects. And later on, I moved to the marine agenda. So I guess that it has been a combination of things. You just cannot rely on one specific thing. You just need to keep adapting yourself to new situations and trying to always seek for your main goal. However, there are other people that they don't have a specific goal in the long term, like my husband, for instance. He's more like setting very small term goals, and he's not too attached to a specific idea in his career, and I value that a lot, because it's so different to what I am. I felt, for instance, that at Heller, there's this opportunity about doing a summer internship, for instance. And I was too focused on the payments for ecosystem services, and I didn't give enough flexibility to myself to explore other areas of work, like social development, I don't know, like gender, or like other areas that now I think like, oh my gosh, if I would go back to Heller, I would probably explore a completely different field just to test it, just so I don't have like this specific focus in my career, just to explore other things. So I think that's also very important, to try to explore other things and not set very rigid goals.
And that's great advice, because I think many of us, when we go into our academic programs, and we may be coming from other experiential backgrounds, and we have a focus, and we have to get this program done, and our career has to include these elements, and it doesn't necessarily leave a lot of room for exploration, because part of it is we have these ideas of what we're interested in doing. The other part is we have these demands on our time from classes and courses and graduation deadlines. So it's certainly understandable, but it's great that you've also seen what value can come out of just allowing yourself to explore. So yeah, that's absolutely wonderful. Related to that in some ways, and related to your academic backgrounds, you've written and co-written research articles related to, for example, conservation ecosystems in parts of South America and flood risk assessments in Suriname. Is the research that you're doing related to the World Bank? Is it an academic interest? And have you seen it utilized or implemented in any form or in any capacity?
So I guess, well, That's interesting because I feel that you just can't divide, or at least in my career, it's very hard to divide my personal interests to my career interests. And again, I'm very lucky because I love the work that I do. So um, I think it's a combination between my personal and career interests. The first publication was actually my master's thesis at Heller.
Oh, okay.
So I guess it was so great to have that opportunity of the second year practicum program where I was able to work with the MADES program at Forest Trends, and I helped develop a payment for ecosystem service scheme for the conservation of beaches in a small Caribbean island. So this was actually directly linked to a specific government project or local project that was from the IDB. So yes, that was applied to that specific project. But then later on, when I started working at the World Bank, or for example, the Nature Conservancy, yes, the publications that I have, they are all from specific projects with the governments. They are mostly about like the identification of like flood risk in an area, and how can natural barriers like mangroves or coral reefs could help reduce the flood risk in certain areas. So the whole point here is to make the governments know that we can rely on nature a lot to reduce these risks. So it's not only about investing in hard infrastructure like seawalls or I don't know, or piers, but you can also have just a conservation strategy that could help you reduce these risks. So yes, this has been the case for Suriname, for Jamaica, for Panama, that these are all three areas where we have published, and we've been able to inform specific physical investments and also policy reforms at the country level.
That's right. And if I may borrow, and I know that some people will laugh at me for saying this, but if you ever seen the movie Jurassic Park, the character played by Jeff Goldblum, the scientist, he says, you know, life finds a way. And in some ways, nature is what I'm hearing could be find its way in mitigating some of the degradation that may occur if we just put the resources in conservation. So
yeah, we are really hoping. It's a very difficult challenge, I would say, because it's not only about the amount of money that you need, but it's also how can you address it from a policy perspective, like in terms of land tenure, in terms of livelihoods. It's also about the speed of the degradation of these ecosystems, or the speed of climate change, and how this is affecting the quality of ecosystems. So even though we know that a good quality, like standing forest or ecosystem, is able to provide all these benefits to communities, it's also about what is the quality of water, for instance, or the quality of sediment, or how much sediment is coming to this area to help a mangrove stand, for instance. So, so there are a lot of variables, but I'm confident that we will be able to do something great by working with governments, with the private sector, and local communities. Yes.
yeah, well, your work is fascinating. Your experience has been great. And I know there's an interest among Heller students in these areas: rural economic development, natural resource management. And so when, as a career development person and as Heller students, what suggestions do you have for those that are interested in making an impact in such broad areas? What do they need to be successful? How do they prepare?
Yeah, I guess it depends a lot about the scale that you want to work on, whether you want to be more involved with the communities and with the actual like on the ground work, like if it's about replanting forests or working with the communities on the livelihoods, on gender issues, or if you want to be more at the higher level with the decision makers, with financing institutions, or it depends. There's a balance that you need to decide. And it has always been important for me to think whether you want to be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond. That's a very important thing that you should ask yourself at this point. For instance, in my career, at least when I was working at Forest Trends as part of my practicum, I was working with this very small organization, and so I was able to have very big responsibilities, and it helped me gain like multiple skills in terms of project management, budget, designing a project from scratch, and then going through like the different stages of a project until we published, and then having a very direct dialogue with the government institution. And I thought that was great, but it was a very small institution, right? So you don't have a lot of career growth opportunities as you would have in other institutions. But you will gain all this knowledge about like different management skills, for instance. While if you decide to start your career in an institution like the World Bank, it will be a completely different set of skills that you would have. Like the technical analysis or the technical support that you will provide to a project, it might not be like very challenging, because that is usually done by senior people. So you will be able to, yes, perhaps understand what is like the role of a very big institution, of a multilateral, in terms of decision making, how the different donors are also shaping the development agenda in different topics. But at the same time, you as yourself, you won't be able to give a lot, but you will be able to have a lot of career growth opportunities inside that institution. So it's a balance. It's something that it's not good or bad. It's just, it depends a lot on the personality. There's perhaps something extra that I would recommend you to address, and is the personal growth that is not related to your career. For instance, I used to live in this small island of San Andres, then I lived in St. Croix, that is the Virgin Islands, then I lived in Grenada, and I was so happy just moving to one place, from one place to another, until I got married and have a child.
Yes.
Once you have a child, it is so difficult to just move around the world.
Yes.
So that's a super important thing to keep in mind. You may not have like a lot of flexibility later on in your career. So you should take advantage of your early career to just gain as much experience as you have, as you can on the ground. And later on, well, perhaps you're lucky that you can just keep moving around. But if you have a child, then you need to think about the quality of education, health, like a lot of things that you weren't thinking about before. So yeah, I think, well, I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, it's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. I mean, and it also goes back to your point about this career exploration component, meaning, let's say you have an interest in natural resource management, you start a career at the World Bank because they have such a broad set of opportunities. You have the flexibility once you're in to explore, and then your career will further define itself down the line. And so I think that's absolutely right. And the considerations of family and other responsibilities as you get more life situations attached to you as you develop. So I think that's absolutely right. One of the things, and this is, we're coming to the conclusion, I want to bring in that I hadn't thought about until now, but COVID-19 has really affected the way people are working and how organizations are thinking about hiring. And so there's a number of initiatives that are going on throughout the world. And if you look at it by institutions such as higher education, institutions like ours are thinking ways to help encourage job, internship, career development for its students and alumni. And so Hire Brandeis 2020, this is what I'm getting to, was one of the initiatives that came out of Brandeis University. And we were so appreciative that you yourself volunteered to be a part of that initiative. And so I guess a question for me is, what did you see as important in such an initiative, and what inspired you to be a part of it?
I think that one of the things that I have valued the most in my career has been my mentors, and how they have played a very important role in connecting me with the right person, and how they have helped me also just to motivate me, and just to say, like, don't give up, like, just to know that there's someone listening and thinking about how can they connect you with opportunities. It might not be that I will be able to hire someone in particular, because, well, it depends on, like, many circumstances, but I am sure that I will do my best to connect people with others that I know in this field. Yeah, and I really value Heller in terms of, like, the quality of education. It's just amazing, like, all the things that you can learn at Heller, and the global perspective, the different issues that we need to address when we develop the project. I haven't seen this in, like, other institutions, I would say, and just by talking with other people when I left Heller School, I realized that I gained a lot of just awareness on we need to take into consideration gender, and, well, of course, the monitoring and evaluation skills that we gain, like just project planning and implementation. All these skills are just invaluable. And these are missing in many ways in other institutions. So I think that there's a great role that we can play in the development agenda, and it can be in very small organizations or large. Right now with COVID, as you were mentioning, I guess that the small NGOs, they might be struggling a lot because, of course, with the recession and everything, they might not be having all the resources that they used to have from the donors, from the private donors. So bringing this knowledge about, for example, fundraising, that is something that at Heller you gain a lot. Or how to develop very strong proposals for these small organizations, I think it will be great.
All right. Now, final question I have is, what pieces of advice, what kernels of wisdom do you have for Heller students that are looking to develop their careers in a very similar fashion as yours, or across nonprofit, for-profit, and government?
Well, I guess that, as I said, is a lot about keeping your network alive. Even though you reach to, like, a very solid position or something, you should never forget about the network that is behind you and that is around you. So you should just keep it alive, just keep telling people what you're doing, have, like, dedicate enough time to just chat with others and learn from what others have been doing, or from your mentors that have helped you from the beginning. Keep learning and listening to others' views. I think that is something that I also learned a lot at Heller, and is just being aware and I guess gaining a lot of empathy with others' situations, and just put on other shoes, you know, that just think about what is the context that they're living, how can you support or address the specific points of view when you are developing a project. And then I think that we usually put a lot of attention on the technical skills and how to sell yourself, and I feel that sometimes we miss like the human side of relationships. And we can never forget that we are talking to human beings, you know, like even though there's someone that is at a very very high level, you should always know that they also have feelings, and you should just have a like more of a personal approach sometimes, instead of being too formal when you reach out to people. And again, just don't give up. And like 90% of people are like super super busy, and they might not reply to your emails, but you should never give up. Just keep trying and keep telling people what you're doing. An example of this is before I joined the bank, there is this person that is at a very high level at the bank, and I was just contacting him and emailing, just saying, oh, I'm doing this and that, can we chat? And once we chatted, and I went to Washington, and he connected me with others in Washington. And later on, like 3 years later, after I was sending him emails about what I was doing, he was never replying to my emails, but I was sending emails about, oh, I'm at the Nature Conservancy, I'm doing this and that. I was able to have this interview at the bank, and my manager asked this specific person, do you know by chance Juliana? And he knew, because he was reading all of my emails, even though he wasn't replying, he knew. And he said, oh yes, Juliana, so she's doing
I
this.
know Juliana.
And so it was perfect, because yeah, just it is just an example of just don't give up.
That's excellent. Well, Juliana, it's been a pleasure. Juliana Castaño, Marine Natural Resource Management Specialist at the World Bank and Heller graduate class of 2011. We will bring you back at some other time, but thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Benny. It will be a pleasure to visit again Heller. I would love to, really, and I wish you luck to all of you, all the students that are watching this, and just text me or email me whenever you want.
Thank you, Juliana.
Okay, thank you, Benny.